We go with Sizzler. We go with Sizzler.
Don't go just yet. It's time for Buckeye Grove Instant Access. Brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com as part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network. Wrapping up the latest Buckeyes basketball news.
I'll make it.
Post-game talk, action from around the conference, immediate analysis, and much, much more, all on the fast break. Don't get whistled for a double dribble. Here's your host, Kevin Noon.
Hey, it's been a long time since we've spoken to you here on the BIA podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Noon, of course, joined as always with Keaton Masano and Braden Moles. We are here in the Circle City of Indianapolis in advance of the Big Ten basketball tournament. I think before we even get into all of this, at the time that we're taping, a little bit of breaking news. I'm going to throw it to Braden just in terms of, the governor of Ohio jumping in and saying that, we're because of coronavirus that the first four may not have anybody in front of it.
Yeah, so there was a Ohio Governor Mike DeWine had a press conference at 2 p.m. on Wednesday and spoke about how they're going to be issuing orders that are going to ban mass gatherings in the state of Ohio. They haven't done so yet, but they're going to do so here in the next, I believe it was 24 to 36 hours, and that would include indoor events such as the First Four that takes place in Dayton every year, and then this year's first-round site in Cleveland, Ohio at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. So that will certainly a developing situation here, but it certainly seems that at least in Ohio here in Cleveland, the first round of the NCAA tournament could be without fans in the stands.
And it'll be interesting to see at the time that we're taping this here on Wednesday afternoon, no such sanctions put in place in terms of the Big Ten tournament. Very real chance that they may close locker rooms. They could, if things start to get worse, they could maybe do the situation where media and immediate families and types are the only ones that are going to be in there. We're living in some uncharted times right now, but we're not going to make it about this. Just that was something timely and topical that we needed to talk about. But we're here for the Big Ten tournament, and let's talk about the Big Ten tournament. The Buckeyes tripped up against Michigan State in their final game, locked in at the number 7 seed. They could have gotten as high as 5. They pretty much locked in at 7 as they'd won 9 of their last 12. I'm just going to throw it at you guys, both of you guys. I'm going to start with you, Keaton. Just impressions of where this team is at coming into the Big Ten tournament.
As far as the way they're playing, I kind of like where they're at, especially with the depleted roster that they've been playing with. I think the reduced roster allowed them to kind of get in rhythms as far as offensively, kind of just finding their roles. And I think Holtman even admitted that a little bit, just saying when you don't have as many guys, the depth isn't as deep, then you can just kind of ride guys a little bit longer, let them play through some mistakes. They don't have that pressure that hey, if I make a couple turnovers, I'm going to get subbed out. So I think that's kind of helped this group. I think they're in a good spot heading into the tournament. I don't really like their draw, but I think that as far as the way they're playing, I think they're in a good spot.
Yeah, I agree. I think it, with the short rotation they had near the end of the year, it really is a testament to Holtman and the team that they were able to finish on a 9-3 run. And what's arguably been the most difficult conference to play in college basketball this season. They didn't play necessarily great teams over the final stretch. They had the sweep against Michigan, they had the win against Illinois and over Maryland. But, I think it really is a testament to how well they were able to play over that final stretch. Especially with, Kyle Young being out for so many games and then, not really having a strong bench presence outside of E.J. Liddell. So I think even with the loss to Michigan State to close out the year, I really think they couldn't have been in a better position now when you looked at where they are now versus the end of January.
Yeah, when you look and they're really doing it with 6. Obviously Justin Orange is a 7th guy, hit or miss kind of what he's going to be able to do. He played for about 7 minutes against Michigan State in that game, didn't have a huge impact. Really the most impactful thing is when he went up against his brother Kyle at the end of the game that was a nice thing to see. But I think as we get ready to see them go in and make this Big Ten tournament run, if Kyle Young isn't able to go for 1, 2, any of the Big Ten tournament or whatnot, it's going to be a short rotation for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. Like I said, kind of referencing their draw, being the 7 seed, I think that's tough because you'll have Purdue, which is essentially a road game, playing in Indianapolis, so that'll be tough. And then you're on the bottom side of the bracket with Michigan State and Maryland, so that depth is going to really be tested when you're considering you're going up against the Big Ten gauntlet in such a short time period, playing a game every day. So that'll be tough for Ohio State. they can show some like grit in this week, then that would be very telling going into the NCAA tournament. I think Holtman understands what his roster looks like right now, and I think it's all about getting healthy for the NCAA tournament.
Certainly the draw is not great in terms of where they are on the bracket, but I also don't think they should be looking past Purdue right now. So the first time they played Purdue back in February, Kyle Young had 16 points, a career high for Ohio State. They beat Purdue by 16 points. So, without having Young on the court this time around, it'll be interesting to see how it works out. And like Keaton had said, with it basically being a home game for Purdue, they have much better shooting splits at home, so as most teams in the Big Ten do. So it'll be really interesting to see how that game turns out. So, I think, you'll have the big matchups to look forward to against, maybe Michigan State or Maryland, I really don't think Ohio State will want to look past Purdue right now.
And we'll get into Purdue in a second, and I'll jump in and say this, though, as somebody who's covered a lot of these. Purdue, I mean, they're a team that's fighting for their NC2A life at this point. It's only an hour and change down the road from West Lafayette to Indianapolis, but I'm not sold that we're going to see a ton of Boilermaker fans make the trip down here. I mean, a lot of these games, especially on day one, day two, there are a large amount of empty seats at this point. It's certainly not going to be a case of where Ohio State's going to bring 6,000-7,000 fans with them at this point. I mean, Ohio State's pretty comfortably in the NC2A tournament and whatnot. I think everybody's kind of freaked out about what's going on, in the world today. I don't know if we're going to see one team or another draw huge fans or whatnot. I mean, maybe Indiana, just because they're kind of the outlier in terms of those fans are the most impassioned in terms of being kind of that basketball-only school within the Big Ten framework. But, we'll see. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, we're kind of dealing with some things that we haven't seen before. I'll bring up one more question to you guys before we go to a break, and then we start breaking down the tournament itself. You guys mentioned that the bottom half of this bracket, no favors to Ohio State. But when you're looking at a conference that's going to send 10 teams to the NC2A tournament, yeah, I mean, there certainly are going to be better matchups, but, there are not many layups whatsoever here. I mean, it would have been great for Ohio State to be the 6 or the 5 and be able to get one of the teams that's playing on Wednesday and maybe have a little bit of a better shot. But once they knew they weren't getting, that type of matchup there, I don't know if it's a case of, Michigan, they swept them, Rutgers, Iowa, Penn State are all kind of playing their first game within that bracket. I don't know if there was really a favorable draw per se.
Yeah, like you said, this conference is very deep, and it's going to be difficult no matter where you're going to be put on this bracket. I just would say I don't like the matchup with some of these teams in the bottom with the top-tier teams. I think there's certain teams that can make deep runs, and I think Ohio State, unfortunately, is being put in the same side of the bracket as two of them. But I do think that I like the fact that they're playing Purdue, who isn't going to be playing a game before they play Ohio State. So if they can't have a rhythm built, they're going to be just as cool as Ohio State to start off with the break they've had. So I think that part of it's favorable. But like you said, I mean, you couldn't really go 2 games in this conference without playing a good team, because really the bottom feeders in Northwestern and Nebraska, they're going to be out like the first game or 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at the bracket, the only really favorable matchup you can draw here maybe would have been the 5 seed getting to play either Northwestern or Minnesota, but even then Minnesota beat Ohio State. So it's like really anywhere you look on here, you're going to find a team that can beat any team in the Big Ten on their best day. So I think, I mean, in the long term, I really think it's going to be helpful to Ohio State that they may not have the most favorable matchups, but that's kind of life in the Big Ten tournament and in March Madness. You're never, unless you're a 1 or a 2 seed playing a 16 or a 15, you're not going to have those favorable matchups in these tournaments. So I think it'll be good experience for them to have these stretch of games, especially if they still have that short rotation where they're going to get to just play and really fine-tune things before they get to the NCAA tournament.
And we'll talk about the Purdue game and the rest of the bracket and make some predictions here on the other side of the break.
Egg Water Conditioning has been treating well in city water in Central Ohio with American-made water filtration products for over 60 years. Have a water quality problem? The water treatment experts at Hague know how to solve it. Not sure if your water softener is working? They will test, inspect, and sanitize any brand of water softener for only $20. Schedule a system checkup or water test today by calling 614-836-2195 or visit them online at HagueH2O.com. That's HAGUE H2O.com.
Welcome back to the BIA podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Noon, as always joined with Keaton and Braden as we sit here in Indianapolis in advance of the tournament. Ohio State opens up in the 7-10 game against Purdue. That'll be the first game of the evening session on Thursday, and that game will be seen on Big Ten Network. Ohio State and Purdue played once this year. It was a 16-point win by the Buckeyes, as Braden had said, 68-52 at Value City Arena. You can take some things from what happened in that game, but everything also kind of changes once you get into the urgency of the tournament. Ohio State obviously going to be without Kyle Young in this situation. Purdue's coming off of a loss to Rutgers, which could have certainly helped their NC2A resume. How are they going to be feeling? Are they going to come out and just empty the bucket because they're on the wrong side of the bubble at this point? Is it going to be hard for them to get over that? A lot of questions that I don't know if any of us necessarily have answers for, but we certainly have our thoughts going into this.
Yeah, and like you said, I think you can't really look at the previous matchup just because of the roster changes, and then also Ohio State played so well at home, just like a lot of Big Ten teams. So it's going to be interesting to see these teams match up in a neutral site and have to play almost like away from home, where a lot of teams didn't play that well. So I think that Purdue is kind of an interesting team, though. They've had some very high highs, very low lows. I mean, they came off a win at Iowa, the second last game of the year, but then dropped one at home against Rutgers. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what kind of Purdue team you get and what kind of Ohio State team you get, because there's been times where Ohio State's looked like a top 5 team in the country, but then they'll have a following game where they just don't look like they got off the bus per se. And it's going to be very interesting to see which teams show up in this tournament and which team is the hottest team to make the run.
Yeah, I think this could potentially be a very different Purdue team than the one Ohio State played just a month ago. I mean, like Kevin had alluded to, when you have a team that, Purdue's, when you look at the bracket here, Purdue's kind of the only team in the Big Ten tournament that is kind of facing, fighting for their life here. Because I think Indiana, we all think is likely in, but Purdue is one that, if they lose, they may be going home for good this year. So that may really add a extra factor here for their motivation. And then in terms of how the last game went, I mean, I think one big area was that Purdue's leading scorer, Travion Williams, as I had wrote in the written preview we have up on Buckeye Grove right now, he's leading the Boilermakers with 11.5 points per game this season. Just had 4 in Value City Arena last time. So as well as Ohio State played defensively, that was with basically a full team then. And now with a short rotation, it'll be interesting to see if they can still keep Williams at bay. He's had 17 points in 4 of their last 7 games. So he'll be a big factor if he can get back to scoring again tomorrow.
Ohio State held Purdue to 35.2% from the floor, 20% from beyond the arc. Ohio State hit 9 3-pointers, something that they haven't done in either of the last 2 games for the Buckeyes at that point. Ohio State did leave a lot of points out there, though, 15 of 23 from the line in that game. That's something that they certainly have corrected down the stretch a little bit better from the line. +7 in the rebounding edge. There were certainly a lot of things that Ohio State did very well in that game that, we haven't seen as much of in the last 2 games, but you also have to remember Ohio State played Illinois and knocked them out of contention for a lot of things at that point, locking up the number 1 overall seed, and then had to go up to East Lansing and play against Michigan State, who ended up clinching a share of the Big Ten title in that situation. It wasn't like Ohio State came up and finished with Nebraska Northwestern or anything along those lines. Ohio State came out playing against some of the best that the conference had to offer at that point. So, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that one. We certainly don't want to get ahead of ourselves. We're going to kind of jump around in this bracket, but if Ohio State does get by Purdue, potentially, they're going to have another matchup against Michigan State, and that's certainly it's going to be good not playing them at the Breslin Center, but it's the same Michigan State team that put a hurting on the Buckeyes.
Yeah, the good thing for Ohio State is I don't know if Michigan State can play much better than what they did. I mean, we were just talking about it, about how, like, in the Michigan-Ohio State game, Ohio State had a couple bank threes go their way, but then you play Michigan State at Michigan State, and Rocket Watts had one from, like, almost the side. So it felt like it was Michigan State's day in the Breslin Center last Sunday, but I mean, that's just a tough matchup no matter which way you slice it. With Izzo, you're going to get a defense that's going to be hungry. They usually are playing their best basketball at this time of the year. After falling out of the rankings, they've risen back up. So that'd be a tough matchup for Ohio State. And I think kind of what Braden was alluding to, though, I think this will only help Ohio State going in the NCAA tournament, just with more experience against these top-flight teams. And I don't know which way I would lean in that matchup, I'd probably lean towards Michigan State just because of the way they've been playing. And I think guard play really defines the month of March. And with Cassius Winston playing at a high level, I think that would help the Spartans out. But yeah, that's not the matchup you'd want in your second game in the tournament.
Yeah, I agree. I would not personally like Ohio State's chances if they do go on to play Michigan State. Like Keaton had said, that was Michigan State playing at maybe their best this season. But, even if they can't repeat that, even a Michigan State team playing at 80 or 90%, still one of the best teams in the country. So if Ohio State's still having to deal with that short rotation, which at that point will have played probably 6 or 7 games at that point with only 6 or 7 guys really getting any significant minutes, I'm not sure if Ohio State will be able to keep up with them.
Not looking for any long answers here, but we'll talk about the Wednesday games. By the time we post this, they may almost be underway at that point. Northwestern, Minnesota, Nebraska, Indiana. Can any of those teams create any problems in the tournament beyond their games that they're playing on Wednesday, in your opinion?
I like Indiana a little bit with their roster. I think playing Penn State, if they can get by Nebraska, Penn State's been kind of struggling a little bit. That'd be a favorable matchup. And then I'm just shocked by how poorly Minnesota's played down the stretch. I mean, maybe it's just our vantage point being covering Ohio State, seeing Marcus Carr kind of go off against OSU twice. But, yeah, I would expect them to be able to beat Northwestern, but that Iowa matchup isn't very favorable for them. So I'd say Indiana has the potential to get to that Maryland game, win 2 games, and then play Maryland. But other than that, I don't see any of those teams going that deep.
Yeah, I basically echo every sentiment Keaton had. I don't see Northwestern or Minnesota making any sort of run past Iowa. Nebraska is just a bad basketball team. But so Indiana, they did beat Penn State earlier this season, but unfortunately for them, they got swept by Maryland in 2 games. So yeah, I could definitely, with like Keaton had said, with how Penn State has kind of struggled down the stretch here, I could see Indiana making it to Thursday against Maryland, but I just don't really see them getting past that. I mean, Archie Miller has, he's kind of come off the rails here recently. But I don't know if this is a team that is really prepared to make that type of run this time of year.
I listened to the Illinois-Iowa game in the car when I was on my way back from East Lansing over the weekend, and Ohio State certainly would have benefited if Iowa would have won. They would have moved up a seed line in this tournament. I don't know. I think that Minnesota could give Iowa a bit of a game just if Luka Garza, your Big Ten Player of the Year, doesn't play a Luka Garza type of game. And that certainly is possible. He's averaged 20 pretty much across the board in terms of games, so a lot of teams aren't having that type of success taking him out of rhythm. But if Minnesota, who has some solid interior players, can sit there and muddy things up, play kind of an ugly game there, I think we could see an upset there, but I don't know. And as for Indiana, yeah, they're playing close to home. Penn State's kind of a Jekyll and Hyde team in certain respects. This is an event that Indiana has no success in. Indiana has had next to 0 success whatsoever in the Big Ten tournament. For the 8 millionth year in a row, they are not going to win the Big Ten tournament. I'm just going to say that right now. That's just not going to happen. So there you go. So, looking at the bracket, let's pick a winner from the top half and the bottom half. Who do you like to see in the finals of the Big Ten tournament?
Well, I'm obviously going to go with Michigan State because I've been kind of tooting their horn this entire time. I just really like Cassius Winston at the guard spot, Xavier Tillman down low. I mean, I think they just have a good complement of players who fit roles for them. And then on the top half of the bracket, I was kind of debating. I like Michigan, their matchup, and I like their path. I'm not as high up on Wisconsin as the seeding would suggest, but I really liked what I saw from Illinois. I think, like I'm saying with the guard play, I like Ayo at guard for Illinois, so I think he'll have some good performances in this tournament. So I would go Illinois versus Michigan State as my championship matchup.
I think for me, bottom half, I'll kind of echo Keaton's sentiments again about Michigan State. I think they're clearly the best team in the bottom half of the bracket, and I don't really see them having many difficulties getting past Maryland or Penn State, whoever it may be, who they would face in the quarterfinals. Or semifinals, excuse me. But so in the top of the bracket, I think that Iowa really could make a difference in the top part of the bracket here. We don't know what a Luka Garza style player will do this time of year. I mean, he could, he has been incredible all year, but he really could take it to the next level in the Big Ten tournament and beyond in March Madness. So I really think that, if you have a dynamic player like him, you can go as far as he wants to take you. So I really think he could, they did lose to Illinois to close out the season, but I really think that he could take them, really far in the tournament.
I just don't want to go in line with what everybody else is saying, so I'll start in the bottom. I'm going to say Maryland, and I say that only to be different. I do think that Tom Izzo teams in March just kind of play at a different level, but Michigan State has not won every Big Ten tournament championship. That's just what it is. Maryland certainly is not playing its best ball right now. Do they bounce back? I don't know. The thing I'll say about Michigan State in that Ohio State game playing there at Breslin Center, everything happened with 4 players. If Sticks is able to get out there and have a big game for Maryland, I mean, he's going to be a lot for them to contend with. They did go 10-11 deep, but it's really those 4 that are going to be the big difference makers. So I'm going to take the Terps at the bottom, kind of with a little bit of protest on my side. Looking at the top, I like Illinois too. I really like Illinois. I think that this is the type of event when a guard can go off and just carry a team, and Ayo Dosunmu is the kind of guy that can just put a team on his back and do things like that. Iowa certainly didn't have an answer for him at stretches. And, Brad Underwood, a coach that I thought was going to be run out of here by the end of this year, has his team, sitting there, in position to potentially win a Big Ten tournament championship. So who do you have in your matchup? Who do you have winning?
I'm going to take Michigan State, but I really think it's going to be a great game. I think that could go either way, so I would not be shocked if Illinois were to take that game. But I think that I just like the experience of Michigan State with Cassius Winston. It just kind of feels like when you were watching his senior night, it's kind of like a story, but kind of like ending to his like regular season. So I think that might continue through the Big Ten tournament. So I would just give the edge to Izzo and the Spartans in that championship game.
Yeah, it's sometimes fun to be the contrarian just for the sake of being contrarian, but I agree with Keaton. I think Michigan State's going to take it home. Nobody has more experience in this situation than Tom Izzo, and I think while there are other good teams in the bracket like Illinois and Iowa, like we had mentioned, I really just have difficulty thinking that any of them will be able to compete with the depth that Michigan State has.
Oh, I have a Maryland team that I'm not exactly sold on, and I feel like I'm taking a little bit of a flyer on Illinois. Oh, give me a coin to flip. I don't know. Illinois. All right, we're going to go with Illinois. We're going to sit there. For all the reasons I think that they're going to get to the finals, I'm going to sit there and say that's going to be the reason that they're going to win it. Going to jump in really quick with a statement we got from the Big Ten Conference. At this time, the Big Ten men's basketball tournament will continue to be held as scheduled. Post-game media availabilities will continue to take place at the Big Ten men's basketball tournament. However, they will be held in a larger designated area of Bankers Life Fieldhouse in lieu of team locker rooms. You've seen the SEC close locker rooms. We're seeing professional leagues start doing those types of things, all because of the coronavirus scare. Again, we're not going to get too deeply entrenched in that, but that is breaking news. So if you have tickets at this point, you're still able to get in and see the games. I'm going to throw one last curveball at the guys, and we're going to call it a show. When we get to Selection Sunday, I'm not asking you to pick a city or region or anything like that. What seed line is Ohio State on Sunday?
I think Ohio State will be a 5 seed. That's kind of where they've been balanced out. I don't think they'll do anything this tournament to warrant them jumping up or falling down, so I say they're going to get a 5 seed.
I'll say 6 right now. If they happen to go on and beat Michigan State, I think we could see them jump up. But right now, with the struggles they had in January, but the eventual turnaround they were able to have, I think a 6 seed would be good for them.
I think if Ohio State gets 2 wins, and that's a big if with Michigan State there, they could climb as high as a 4, but I like them as a 5 seed myself. I think they get shipped off somewhere. I don't think that they're going to see anywhere close to the Midwest in terms of what's going on. And I could see them at the back half of the S-curve in terms of the draw that they get. Hopefully they don't end up with an East Tennessee State or somebody like that. But we will definitely do some sort of podcast after the draw is in place and everybody's had a chance to absorb what's going on there. But, for now, we are calling it a show from Indianapolis here as the BIA podcast is ready for the Big Ten men's basketball tournament. For Keaton and Braden, I am your host, Kevin Noon. Thanks for listening.
Be sure to stay up to date with Buckeye Grove Instant Access when the news breaks or after the big game, exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher as part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network. Hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know and never miss a single episode.